The galaxy burns. The heretic falls. And the Emperor protects. Welcome, Imperial citizens, to The Emperor Protects. My name is Doug with 2+ Tough, and with me is always my co-host Dan from Cubic Shenanigans. How you doing?
Doing great, my friend. Doing great.
Yes, and thank you everyone for your patience while we've been out and away. I've been doing a lot of traveling this summer with my lovely wife. We do book signings for her. She's an author, and we've just been out. Our schedule has been crazy. But we're here to talk about the Horus Heresy books so you don't have to read them if you don't want to. And I felt like that we really provided a public service for the Dark Angels books. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
But today we're getting into a book that I was not prepared for how excited I was by the end of it. Like, I went into it with kind of a vague sense of what the plot was, and then at the end of it I was just like, yes! I was just, oh man, I was so stoked. So
yes, absolutely.
Today we are talking about Slaves to Darkness, which is this fall on like the recency or age as far as the...
It's kind of near the end. I'd say it's in the last third of the book series. It is quite a bit later because it's after Titan Death, which happened on Beta Garma, which we're going to talk about briefly.
Yep.
So it's right before Horus hits Terra.
Yes, and so this is essentially we've had like 10 to 20 years of super fun times during the Heresy, and now Horus is getting the band back together because we're gonna go punch the Emperor.
It's true.
So Dan has provided a fantastic kind of setup to kind of place this in context, because I personally didn't know much about Beta Garmin.
Yep.
There was a campaign book that came out recently I'm going to grab, but that's really about it. So go ahead, launch into this, and we'll jump into it.
One thing real quickly, I wanted to say that John French was the author, and he dedicated this book to Alan Bly. And most people who are Heresy fans or Warhammer fans know Alan Bly was an individual who was incredibly influential in the Warhammer world, and he had passed right around the time this book was written. So I just thought that was worth mentioning.
Absolutely.
because John did that. So anyway, what the prologue we need is this. There is another book, and it's before this one. And what happens is Leman Russ, who's the Primarch of the Vilca Fenrica, the Space Wolves, he decides to end the heresy by just destroying his brother. Boom. Cut off the head, kind of a thing. And in this story, everybody is like, you are a crazy blah, 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 Well, Leman Russ is a crazy blah, blah, blah. So
like a fox.
Yeah, we don't really care. So there was a planet called Trisolian, and basically he took his fleet, boarded the Vengeful Spirit, which is Horus's flagship, and he actually had the spear of Russ, which kind of is an emperor's weapon, and he wounds Horus, but he doesn't kill him, but he does wound him. He puts this huge wound in his side.
Yep.
And they escape. They took a huge amount of casualties. It's an interesting story, but the bottom line is, although Horus is still able to command the traitors at the Battle of Beta Garmin, which is after the wound happens, he falls into a coma because the wound that was inflicted by Russ reopens. And so that's kind of where the story begins.
Yep. And so, and what's cool is I didn't feel like reading that entire book was necessary in any way.
No.
Like, it just opens up with them rushing Horus in with this huge wound, and they fill it in pretty quickly. So, like, it was very well done, I think, as far as setup.
Yes, but I just thought it'd be interesting for people to know, well, how do you get the wound in his side?
Absolutely.
It's a pretty big deal. So the plot actually begins with a kind of a callback to the night before the triumph at Ulanor, the original one, because there's going to be another one.
Yes.
Horus and Malkador just kind of hanging out. And this was really interesting to me. Horus just felt so human here. I mean, he's actually unsure, right, of what to do. And Malkador's like, hey, look, this is what was meant to be, And then he asked him, he said, what would you have done if it had been given to one of your other brothers? Well, he said, first of all, I'd ask why not me, and then I'd do my best to help him do what he was given the task to do. And then Malkador says that's exactly what most, and I think that's the key word, most of your brothers will do.
Yep.
But, you know, those who are resentful or in doubt, they'll eventually accept this or not. And so, again, it's of interest how vulnerable and how human Horus is here. And also of interest, I find, is the Emperor basically left the Sigilite, you know, to talk him through this, because the Emperor just came up and said, "Hey, you're the War Master. See you later, man. I got to go back to Earth, and I got chemistry lab to work on in my basement.
Big stuff going on. You're not allowed to know about it, even though you're going to be in charge of it. But I got big stuff going on." You're like,
Malkador, once again, he just had to kind of go, "Okay, I'll be the counselor. You know,
yep,
come in for a session, man. I'll need to talk through this."
He really did sign up for the worst job in the Imperium. Like, I have no.
Emperor's Sigilite, it's true.
It's just the war. He's a camp counselor for gods, and it sounds like the worst existence.
Oh, it's so true. It is so true. So that's kind of the setup. Now we flash to the present, and what you talked about. We're on the Vengeful Spirit, and this is, you know, we talked about the wound reopening. Horus is literally being dragged to his throne room by Malagurst, Axeman, Kyber, and Tormageddon. Now, let's talk about some of these people. We know Malagurst is his equerry. He's called Twisted because even though he's a space marine, he's kind of screwed up physically. Axeman is, you know, kind of a first captain. Kyber is in charge of the Gesterians, who are like Horus's bodyguard. And then Tormageddon is an incredibly interesting character to me because he's a demon. This is a guy who's a demon summoned by our bestest friend Erebus, and Erebus actually used the body of a loyalist Luna Wolf who had died on Isfahan 3. Yes. And so it's this really horrible thing that happened to someone who was fighting for the Emperor.
Yeah, it's like a desecration. Yeah.
So these are the people that are going to be the main characters too in this part of the story. But Horus is bleeding out, and it looks like he's really dying because, and this was one of the, I thought this is amazing, just how ruthless these people are, Doug. So as they move towards the throne room, you know, on the command deck, a human officer sees that they're doing this, dragging him. And Malagurst just says, "Okay, everybody on the command deck, which is like hundreds of humans, they're all dead. Kill them all.
Yep.
If anybody saw anything, or there's a chance they did, they're dead." It's like,
yep.
God.
Cut to all the lunar wolves like hacking and slashing with guns. Be like, "This is a stealth mission, guys."
So yeah, that was kind of horrible. But when they get to the room, it's weird. Just the description that John French has of the room itself. There's shadows and color and light, and everything is like, I guess it's kind of shrouding the War Master. It's like the warp is surrounding him right now.
Yeah, you know, at first I didn't understand if they brought him to his throne or if they brought him to like the Astronoma, whatever, like the part of the ship where all the Psychers are. I was like, this whole place just seems like it's halfway between hell and Earth, and that's his throne. That's where he chills. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And then this is the thing, though. He's on kind of the edge of death, and all of a sudden he kind of wakes up and he looks at Kyber and he goes, "Hey, what's the tactical situation? How's the fleet doing? What's going on?" And he's like, just like, then the big word is that he feels the pain from this wound.
Yep.
That will not heal, and he commands these guys in the throne room, "Summon my brothers one last time, and we're going to meet on Ulanor." You're going, oh my God, they're going back there. Yep. It was like, oh, and this is an important part of the story. Why don't you tell us what's kind of happening then at this point?
Yeah, so at this point, as far as like how our story splits up and stuff like that, is what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned how important it was that the story does.
Oh yeah. So essentially, I was kind of like a little lukewarm on the book at this point, and then when you get to this next stretch where Lorgar shows up, And he's like, hey, I'm going to help you. How can I help? And he's basically told, go get Fulgrim. And then another force is sent to go get Angron. And so we talked about the band getting back together. But I wanted to mention the structure of the book is essentially these three stories of the Primarchs on the Chaos side, all reconciling with each other. You have, what is it, the Iron Warriors and the World Eaters, Emperor's Children with the Word Bearers, and then several legions, all, well, it's really more of an internal struggle, but with the Sons of Horus.
Yes.
And those three stories are kind of how this thing is divided. And so you're bouncing around between them, but individually the stories are not very complex. You're not going to get lost, but they are super fun.
Yeah. And so the first of the three, we're on the Trision. And the Trision is Lorgar's flagship. And the scene was obscene. You're going, what did they just say? So literally, Lorgar had 32,000 human beings nailed to the hull of his ship as sacrifices for the demons in the warp so that he didn't need void shields. We don't need stinking void shields. You're going, oh, and the way he described these demons just feeding on these humans who just weren't dying, it was like, that's brilliant. No void shields. It's
exactly.
Gosh, what a way to start. And then we meet the second really key character in Lorgar's thread here, and his name is Lyak. He's a chaplain. He's kind of a Val Gorbat, too, if you remember the, Argel Tal and the guys who were kind of the possessed. He's kind of like that, but he prepares for the arrival of his Primarch. There's all this ritual, of course, because it's Lorgar and it's the Word Bearers. And
he's somewhere between like a Gal Vorbak and someone who has like a super cursed chaos item. It's his helmet.
Yes.
But he's somewhere in there because he has a lot of like supernatural, even for Space Marine powers. But yeah.
And then when Lorgar comes into the chamber, and again, there's all this ritual and everything, Lyak says, hey, we received a summons from Horus. He wants us to meet him on Beta Garmin. And Lorgar goes, Lyak, we did not receive a summons. And Lyak's looking like, what? We are simply going to go to Beta Garmin and meet Horus there. You're going, whoa, okay. And then he finishes by saying something is happening to Horus. And you just get this feeling already that Lorgar's up to something.
Yes. I will say this is the book where he seems the most duplicitous.
Oh, it's such...
In a way he doesn't in the other books, I don't think.
Oh, just terrible. So that's that part. And then we kind of slip over to the second part. And what we do is meet a Iron Warrior named Volk. At the time we meet him, he's a pilot in this grand flight of ships. They're on this planet Kraid. He's preparing for his mission. They'd heard rumors that Ultramarines were headed for this planet because it's a critical planet in the defense that the traders had put up. And so they're flying thinking, hey, we're just going to be dealing with Imperial Navy, whatever. All of a sudden, a blue airplane shows up, and they're going, oh, crap, the Ultramarines are here already. Oh, whoops. So that battle, somebody shot down his wingman, and then he lures the Ultramarine into a turret ambush, which all that was really, really cool. And he ends up landing at Perturabo, the Iron Warrior's Primarch, his fortress, and he goes to the Primarch, and the Primarch asks Volk, he says, hey, I asked for you because I think you know this guy who's come here as an emissary from Horus. His name's Argonis. Well, it turns out that Volk does know Argonis, that they had fought together, and so brothers, in a way, Space Marines can be brothers, that they've had the shared experience of combat and stuff. Yep. And Perturabo basically wants him to watch this guy and follow him around, see what he really wants, And the emissary, the message is, Perturabo, you need to go find Angron and get him to Ulanor. And the question probably you and I are both asking is, why Perturabo? You know, and I'm thinking right away, I'm thinking iron within, iron without, you know, either that applies to Perturabo, or is Perturabo the iron within and Angron's the iron without. But whichever way it is, you know that that has something to do with this.
See,
and in the final confrontation, you know, you and I had some conversation about, you know, why Perturabo, what did he have? And I think it's that inner strength that Perturabo has that other Primarchs don't. You know, that stoicism through all the stuff that the Iron, and that's what another theme here, Doug, with the Iron Warriors, is you constantly hear them say, you know, we have always been thrown into combat. We've always done what we've been told. We've always sacrificed ourselves and always gotten the job done. And so you kind of wonder if that's part of it, you know, that balance to Angron's rage.
Yeah, when I first read that he was going after Angron, my initial thought was like, okay, he's going to stop by, he's going to grab some Dark Mechanicum, they're going to make some baller chains and, like, you know, demon-infused chains, and we're going to lasso the god. Like, that's kind of how I figured this was going to go down. Okay. But John French is a far better writer than me, so it became a battle of wills, which really, honestly, is more about the nature of chaos. Yeah. So, I thought it was really cool. I didn't think too much about the iron within, iron without thing in terms of how they contrast with one another, but that Angron is a character who is without control, and Perturabo is a character who is in perfect control. Everything he does is deliberate. He decides it. Even if he's ordered, he decides it. And I'm just like, he's cool.
Yes. Yeah.
But also, it does contrast with both of them. The book is called Slaves to Darkness. Is Perturabo a slave at this point? He's following orders, but he's choosing to do the thing that he wants to, or feels as though he needs to do, to capture the actual slave to darkness who cannot be controlled, which is Angron.
Yes.
Who's the bigger slave? By the end of the book, there's no answer, but it's an interesting proposition.
I agree with you. I agree.
So please continue. Yep.
That's a great point. No, that's a great point. So now we do flash around a lot in this story. So we're going back to Malagurst. He, you know, so he's given the job of, like, communicating to some of these other Primarchs. And the first person he has to deal with is Mortarion. And this conversation is just hilarious. And, you know, Mortarion's just petulant.
Yes, I love him. I've never wanted to build a Death Guard army more in my life.
If this is an order from the War Master, then I want to hear it from the War Master. And then Malagurst, but I am the emissary. I am the mouth. I'm the spokesperson for. And he goes, like, you dog. That's all you are. If he wants me to do something, put him on the phone. You know, on and on and on and on.
I want to speak to your manager. I am the manager. No, your manager. Exactly.
Exactly. It was a very entertaining and instructive conversation. So once he finishes with that, then some people might remember from Mechanica, when we did that book, that Calvor Hall, who is the new, you know, head guy on Mars, had an emissary called Satanul, and we met her in that book. And she kind of ghosts into the room, and it's kind of funny. Yeah, what's going on with the Primarch, you know? And I love her character. Just the way she talks is so sibilant voice, and she's so creepy. She's not threatening, but she is, you know.
She's ominous.
It was just... ominous, that's a great word.
Well, because for a bunch of people who don't know fear, they do know ominous, and they're all kind of weirdly jarred by her.
Yeah, I just love her character. It's so cool. So once, so that conversation goes on between the two of them, and it may not seem like these conversations have, you know, much meaning, but they end up in the long run that they do, especially that Satanul has shown up. That's very important in parts of the story.
Yes.
So now, of course, Lyak and Lorgar arrive, and they're really pushing Malagurst to see Horus. And, of course, Malagurst is very protective of the War Master. And Kyber and the Justarians are right there, and they're within like a hair's breadth of just blasting Lyac into atoms. But Lorgar, in the way he can, he calms things down. He advises Malagurst, send Perturabo to look out for Angron. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing there was like, wait a minute, Malagurst has already sent an emissary. You're a little late in the uptake, and then he says, hey, if Perturabo's going after Angron, I'm going to go look for Fulgrim.
Yep.
Okay. And then you kind of, as he's walking away, you kind of see him looking at the ship, and he notices things, and he says things about the ship, like the Vengeful Spirit, like, oh, this is a really good setup. Like, there's all this chaos, and there's these demons in the walls. And this is really nice. I could use this. This is pretty good. This is Delta Comfort. The warp, he is such a pretentious blah blah blah. Oh my God, you can't. But that again is even stronger indication that he is up to no good.
Absolutely.
Basically. And then Lyac and Lorgar, they told Malagurst they know something's wrong with the War Master, and they can help him. They can help heal him. And once again, that something's up. Mm-hmm. They're going to do something that's not going to be good for anybody.
No, because the last time they tried to help, he ended up in this exact same position on Davin.
That's right, exactly.
Like literally shot for shot.
And so then we switch. We're off the Vengeful Spirit, and Lorgar and Lyac are having a conversation. This is where they kind of reveal Lorgar's endgame here, which is relatively early in the book, but it's fine. It doesn't seem to be too early once you keep reading. So he makes fun of Malagurst and says he's, like a lackey dog to Horus, and Horus can't lead the war because Horus is a warrior, and, you can't lead traitors if you don't believe in the truth, because Lorgar knows the truth, and he's the only one who's strong enough to resist the truth. Mm-hmm. It's just like he's just so full of himself, and it's like he keeps stressing the truth, but in essence, every time he says that, I hear him say my truth.
Essentially, yes, that's what it came to. It might have started as a capital T truth, but at this point in the devolution of the Space Marine traders, it's his. Yeah. It's about him.
Yeah, he believes he's the only one who can fulfill the gods' purpose. He wonders why the gods, why did the gods choose Horus and not me? Just his ego is bigger than the Imperial Palace, man. It's just huge.
It is, but at the same time, I appreciate it because I'm reading it and I'm like, this is exactly what every Chaos Space Marine lore that you play in 40K thinks. I mean, suppose, yeah. And I was like, that's a pretty good archetype as far as like if everyone follows their Primarch, I guess this is what Chaos. Yeah. Chaos. I don't know. It seemed very reminiscent of a lot of the 40K books I've read, where I'm like,
you're right. You're right about that.
They're becoming Chaos Space Marines now.
And the funny thing is, I think Lorgar really has never understood the truth. He hasn't, because all he's done is molded it and made it in his image. And I always ask the question: is the Pantheon just allowing him to do this? They're just using him. He is a slave to darkness for sure.
Yes. Because
if they were to pull their favor, Lorgar would be nothing. So.
And you hit on a good point of like how much does he actually understand the plan or the gods or whatever, and I think he understands that he was lied to, and that's it. Like, I mean, which is rough, but like, I don't know. It just, there's so many things that get like excused because like, well, the Emperor lied to us. Like, yeah, that doesn't matter at this point. Not when you're hanging 35,000 people off the side of your ship.
God. Horrible. And we leave this scene, we go back to Volk, and this is a part of this story where Argonis has joined Volk, and they talk about, I think I mentioned it before, just this this stoic, unflinching, unquestioning sacrifice that Perturabo continually makes of his legion when he's asked to do something, right? It becomes a real big thing of exposition because you hear about this huge list of things the Iron Warriors have done and how every one of them has cost them, you know, a massive amount of the Legion, and they're always doing it for whoever, you know, for the Emperor earlier, but now for Horus, and they're just. It didn't get to the point where they felt like they were being sorry, you know, they're sorry for themselves, but it helps you, I think, understand a little bit how Perturabo feels as a Primarch.
Yes,
because he's kind of been left out in terms of the whole chaos thing, you know. When there's a story where, you know, Fulgrim tricks him into giving up the chaos thing so he can become the snake Fulgrim, you know, and Perturabo's like, what the hell just happened? Why didn't I get any toys? You know, and once again, it's always this way. So that was just a brief thing, but I thought it was revealing in terms of, you know, who the Iron Warriors are.
Absolutely.
And then we get back to, and we meet a new character on the Vengeful Spirit. His name is Ekadon.
Yes.
And he's practicing in a combat arena, and Kyber comes in. And Kyber asks about Malagurth's ability to lead, you know, right now, given the fact the War Master's out of it. And Kyber basically is saying, hey, look, we probably need to do something about this. We need to do something about Malagurth because he just doesn't have what it takes. And he says, you can't, you know, if you're not with us, you're against us, basically, is what he said.
Yep.
You're assuming that Aximand is part of this, as well as Kyber. You don't know if Tormageddon is or not. You can't quite tell. But the other two, definitely, they're ready to take down Malagurth. And if Ekadon wants to be part of it, cool. If he doesn't, but
stay out of the way.
Kind of a palace coup thing, which was interesting in the Sons of Horus. You wouldn't expect that.
Exactly. And that's when everybody left to go do their separate stories, I was like, okay, well, now the Horus one seems way less cool compared to wrangling two demons. But then this got real interesting where I was like, we're watching this Legion just absolutely fall apart.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so now, here we go. We're on the planet of Orcus now, and Lorgar and Lyak have to enter some kind of weird labyrinth, and there's a webway portal in there. Webway portal, an Eldar thing. They have to go into it. And all of a sudden, out of kind of nowhere, I thought, this young woman named Actia meets them and says she's going to be their guide.
Yep.
You're like, oh, okay. It happens a lot.
Your GM needed to put an NPC into the story to make it progress, and that's exactly what happened.
Exactly. And she says, you know, why are they here? Lorgar tells her, you know, they're looking for Fulgrim. And then Lyak that evening goes to Actia's chamber, and he's like, I get so tired of the bloodletting and the rich, you know, the sacrifice, the blood. Well, I'm saying this is me. So he goes to her chamber, and there's just more ritual bloodletting. There's this thing on the floor where there's blood running into these little rivulets, into this central little pool of blood, and there's sacrifices all over the place. Thousands of human beings, blood runes, blood on the wall, blood on the floor, blood-soaked armor, bodies pinned to the floor. And I'm just going, okay, I get it.
Well documented.
Oh my gosh, yeah. This is the one thing that I just had to kind of speed read over because, or speed listen through, because I'm going, I think I put it on like 2 point, you know, like double speed, just because I knew what the next 5 minutes was going to be. And they slowed it down again. Yes. So they get into the webway and they start having weird visions. Actia says, don't look back. And Lorgar cries out to Fulcrum, and then he's physically assaulted by all these weird spirits that attack him. And Actia actually is the one who pulls him out of the trap that was set for him because of this, you know, him just screaming out to Fulgur.
Yeah, that's the wrong way to search in the void, apparently.
Right. So she pulls him out, which is good. Then here we're back. Vengeful Spirit. Malagurst talks to Satnul, and they open a secret passageway, which is cool. It leads to, and this is where she comes in handy with all her mechanicum stuff. You know, she's got all the little manipulators and all those things.
Yep.
And so they enter the War Master's chamber. When they leave the passageway and enter the chamber, there's a black armored Astartes pointing a gun at them inside. It's Ekadon.
Yep.
He's all armored. He's ready to go. He lowers his weapon, and as they watch Malagurst and Satanul, Malagurst begins a blood ritual, and you're going, "Oh, a blood ritual!" I'm shocked.
Right.
A blood ritual.
What?
And all, you know, and there's all this stuff that's going on. There's, you know, Malagurst, he's with Horus. So he kind of takes a spirit journey now. He's on a spirit journey when this thing is going on. He starts this ritual. And he and Horus are standing near the fields of Olenor again. There's this callback. There's recrimination, doubt, denial, surrender. And it's really interesting because during this conversation, Malagurst is, you know, because Horus is here and he's fighting these, you know, this battle. He's fighting battles. He's still conflicted. He doesn't want to give in to chaos. This is where you get that part of the story. And he says, I'm not going to give in to chaos. And Malagurst is like, you have to give in.
Yep.
Because if you don't, you're just going to stay here in this spirit place. And if you stay here, the war is lost. Your legion is lost. You have to just
You have to
decide.
accept the power. Yeah.
You just have to decide. You have to make a choice. That's all you have to do. You know, and it's kind of like that first part of the story where who is it? Malkador just said, you have to make a choice. You know, you're going to be the War Master, but you have to make a choice. So anyway, they also meet Iacton Cruz, which is interesting in this little spirit journey.
Yeah.
Which was kind of cool, but he's a demon. So it's like, because Iacton Cruz was cool. So Malagurst, of course, binds the demon, and it's like, hey, take me to Horus. So that's kind of where we are with that. Perturabo now ends up meeting with someone he hadn't intended to. There's this shuttle that comes to him. It's all covered in growths and scabs, and it's on his flagship. And you're going, Nurgle. But it's not. It's not Nurgle. The description of the passenger is very disturbing. He's very corrupted. He kind of sounds like a Death Guard, but he's not. You know, this is the thing. He's just corrupted, Doug. He's just been in the warp for so long.
And yeah, that's the thing to hit on is like in Heresy, I feel like there's a lot more of chaos undivided, like corruption, where it's a little bit of everything. You could, I don't know, you could be the demon of STDs and have both Slanesh and Nurgle kind of in equal whatever, but like...
Yes, that's true. That's great.
There's just a lot more kind of, it's not as rigid as what I'm trying to say.
Right. I think you're right. Yeah. And it turns out his name is Kalik, and he was a son of Horus. Which, wow. So he makes an offer to Perturabo. He says, hey, if you want to become a warlord forever, for eternity, he can't find Angron, in other words. So without warning, the Iron Warriors just disintegrate this guy, destroy his shuttle, and there's a fleet of Kaliks that are there, right? But there's this warning that he gave them about finding Angron, and all of a sudden Perturabo was like, I don't know what all this is about, but we're going to burn this fleet to the ground. And then space battle commences. Volk. This is interesting because Volk becomes something that's very representative in 40K, and I don't know. I don't think in Heresy, but he basically takes his ship and he drives it right into the heart of the enemy attack. He barely survives. He ends up an apothecarian. Argonis is there with him, shows him the end result of the battle. Volk demands to be released until he's shown his body, which is like...
It's the scene from RoboCop when he asks to take the fake thing off and he sees how like mangled he is. He's just a couple of lungs and a lump of meat.
So they force him into a suit of Terminator armor.
Which is cool. I mean, if you had to be stuck anywhere, that's a good outfit.
Yeah. So he goes then to find Perturabo after that because there's something going on he needs to know about. Right. And then we're back to Actia and Lyak in the webway. There's this weird kind of competition in the conversation because Actia says something and Lyak says something else, and just interesting back and forth. They finally find Lorgar after this, and he's fighting a group of custodians. You're going, what? Well, they're in the webway, of course. We don't know what's what. And then a bunch of automatons and demons attack. There's everything happening. Custodians, word bearers, automatons, demons, everything going on. And eventually they arrive in a wooded area. It has this creepy chaos vibe. And right away, you know what this is because you know they're looking for Fulgrim right away. So Emperor's Children, Slaanesh. And in this wooded area, you kind of, the Marines at least, the ones who, not Actia or Lyak or Lorgar, but a lot of the Marines are just kind of lolling around. They're just kind of looking around, seeing what's going on. It's like they're on drugs or something. Yep. And one of them, with Lorgar's approval, gets sacrificed. Basically, the ground comes up and just subsumes him. And the whole time he's being subsumed into the ground, he just looks like a happy camper, man. He's just like, he's
awesome. Along for the ride.
Yeah, it's great. Then they move into this huge marble city. It's overrun with demons. It was beautiful, of course. Marble. They're humans, but they're mutilated. And finally, they meet this really bloated figure with a serpentine lower body. It's just monstrous, this thing, kind of an abomination. And at first it kind of pretended it was Fulgrim because it had the flowing like white hair and everything. And you're going, no.
Why did he want to be fat?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it turns out that this is kind of like one of Fulgrim's courtesans. He's got 6 of them, I think he said, something like that. Yep. And yeah, so
I love Fulgrim basically dances up like he's in Cirque du Soleil. Like he pretends to be like one of the little dancers and just kind of trots right up and throws weights on him.
His voice was just beautiful. Jonathan Keeble, I think, did this one, but his voice was just great. Yes. You know, he's like, "What are you guys doing here? I'm having a great time. You want to join? I'm going to party with my friend here." And it just...
We're just about to start spin class in hell. Like, okay.
Drugs, you know. It just had this cheery voice, and it was also sarcastic. And it's just, this is great.
Yeah, he did really
good. You got to love Fulgrim, man. You got to love Fulgrim. And, of course, he's his demon self now. So he's got the big serpentine body, and he's gigantic and all those things. Yep. And then we're back to the dreamscape, I guess it is, with Malagurst and this bound demon of Iacton Cruz. And the landscape is just full of fire and explosions and slaughter. There's war machines everywhere. There's a figure in black armor. And it turns out, again, Horus just continues to fight. You know, yes. It represents his struggle to master the Pantheon because he doesn't, again, want to give in. You know, either he gives in, becomes a tool to the Four, slave to darkness, of course, another one, or he can keep fighting forever, and just let whatever's going to happen in the real world. All of a sudden, whoosh, Malagurst just pulled back into the real world because the vengeful spirit's under attack. And you're going, Oh my gosh!
Who
Finally,
attacks the vengeful spirit?
finally, some Imperials, right? It's
Yes.
yeah. So so that's where that goes. It's kind of a brief thing, but again, it stresses this battle that Horus is going through in his own spirit journey that's happening while he's wounded. And then Perturabo and Volk and Argonis are on board a shuttle, and they're going to a moon named Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
Sauron, it's a forge world.
I like this bit. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And there's some tech priests, which is interesting. They're guiding them to a bunch of answers, they say. And as they progress, a demon appears and possesses Volk, and who's in this Terminator armor. When Perturabo tries to take it out, it tells him the price of finding Angron is here. You can't pay the price. All right. So basically, Volk is now going to be a demon possessed. We're going to find out what he becomes, which is actually kind of cool.
Yes.
Then Perturabo says he won't surrender his soul to the powers because, this is that thing you talked about earlier, that Perturabo, is he really ever a slave to darkness? Has he ever really given into the demon side? In this passage, this part of the story, is the demon is basically telling him, you can't. We won't accept you, right?
Right.
What do you think of this part of the story?
For me, it was really a fun way to have a little detective work, because we don't do a lot of that in 40K. And so they were like, how do we find the World Eaters? Find whoever makes their bullets. And so they reverse engineer the supply chain to figure out where Angron is. And so that's what brings them here, which I loved the premise of, is just hunting down their resources.
Yeah.
As far as the actual demon taking over Volk and stuff like that, I think it's interesting. My first thought when I read that was, it's interesting how much more common that becomes as a price. Whereas that was a really big deal in the early Heresy. Now Marines are getting thrown by the handful of giving corporeal forms and mutating and stuff like that. This whole section, I will admit, the whole fight scene when there was the random Sons of Horus, I was like, this could have been cut. But this part was interesting because it combines the Mechanicum and how does the World Eaters work with anybody? It's so weird to think about them refueling and rearming. They just don't. I thought it was a pretty interesting scene. Now, as far as what's going on with it, I mean, what is it? Argonis ends up attacking Volk.
Yeah.
After their little exchange, and Volk grabs Argonis's bolter, and you said he absorbs it. Yeah, he kind of eats it into himself. It's this weird, almost like John Carpenter's The Thing, when the chest cavity opens and eats the doctor's hands. That's kind of what I got. And none of that really matters because the Ultramarines Vanguard's fleet has been here, and they thought it was going to be weeks out, and all of a sudden, my understanding is this is some of the forces that were able to leave Calth before the warp storm or ruination storm ate up that whole sector. So they just weren't expecting Ultramarines period at this point, but I don't know, to give you some sense of where that is time wise.
This is where too, when you talk about absorbing it, this is where I started thinking Obliterator.
Yes. Oh, yes, because he's in Terminator armor and he ate the
First
thing.
of all, he's possessed.
Yep.
He's in Terminator armor. It's almost like a flesh metal thing. He's absorbing that bolter, or subsuming it in, and we're going to see more stuff that's going on with him. But to me, and we'll see more of it, Volk is the original Obliterator. He truly is. And how appropriate that would be in the Iron Warriors. That makes perfect sense.
Oh, absolutely.
That would be the Legion where it comes.
And what a meaningful thing for that. It's a demon who was forced to serve the World Eaters who don't value guns. And the first thing he does is jumps over and it's like, give me a body made of gun.
Perfect. So we submit back to Sathanul and Malagurst on the command bridge. Now they know there's a force of Imperial fists and Loyalist Mechanicum coming at the Vengeful Spirit. And Aximon's in command. He's issuing orders to the fleet. And when Malagor sees the situation, he demands that Axeman take the fleet back into the warp, because the War Master is vulnerable here.
Yep, we're not ready.
And Axeman is like enraged. He has Malagor imprisoned in the bowels of the flagship, and you can just see Satanul looking, going, "Oh, humans." Unaugmented humans. So what do you do now? And then when you need a solution, all you need is a demon. There you go.
Absolutely.
So Tormageddon shows up in this cell, and after I thought a really interesting conversation between Malagor and Tormageddon, Malagor makes a deal with the demon, and all this time, it's not just this. There's this amazing fleet battle that's being described going on out in space.
And I did want to stop and point that out. It's really cool.
Oh my gosh, man. You have to give John French credit in this book too, with all the other stuff going on, that he had time, or he made time to have these beautiful space battles going on, with torpedoes being exchanged and ships being sacrificed, and what do you call warp drives or whatever being imploded, and just the broadsides that were being delivered, and the Nova cannons, everything, all the details that you know and love from space combat in the Heresy and 40K were described in this battle. And it was very, very cool that all this stuff was going on. It was a really fun distraction.
Absolutely.
With all the other foolishness going on. So Tormageddon has made a deal. Yep. And while that's happening with Malagur's Ekadon, and he's got this hand-picked group of, I think, 9 other Marines, they're moving to assist Malagurst. But they're stopped by an Astartes named Hegron. And so he's trying to reason with this guy. And I love Ekadon. He just quick draws and blows the guy's head off. Okay, enough talk, man.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and this is what we're really starting to see. This is when it becomes like the Sons of Horus are on the brink of civil war. Oh, because now it used to just be like the lieutenants, and then Malgurst was kind of on the side as like the personal equerry, but also like the cheerleader for Horus. I mean, he was this kind of motivator. And now we have this whole thing where there's those same lieutenants on one side, but now we have a whole squad of Marines that want to usurp control. I'm like, oh, now we're escalating a little bit. We got teams. That's not good.
No, and while this is happening, so he blows Hegron's face off, and then the rest of his squad just destroys Hegron's squad in like 3 seconds. Yep. And it was interesting, I thought, just a little side thing, is that they have these little coins, and you picture the lodge coins, but I think these are more the underhive things, because the whole thing on Chthonia was most of the Sons of Horus were from gangs. They were gangers. And so I think this was one of those coins that he had saved, and he kind of threw it, at Hegron as like a little gesture of respect, before he moved off. But it was kind of interesting that they kept that little cultural thing alive in the Sons of Horus. So it was funny, because now all of a sudden loyalists and traitors are not the only ones who are killing each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is really cool. And then Ekadon cuts open the door to Malagur's prison. Then we move back to Lorgar trying to speak with Fulgrim. And the exchange is just hilarious.
Absolutely. Oh, this is one of the better conversations ever, yeah.
Fulgrim knows exactly what Lorgar's up to. You can think whatever you want about Fulgrim, and is kind of just like, oh, I just don't care, I want to have a great time, everything's fine. But he knows he's a demon now. Think about that. He is a demon. He's not just Fulgrim. And I think Lorgar doesn't give Fulgrim enough credit from that perspective, So he knows what's going on. He knows that Lorgar's looking to overthrow Horus. And you can kind of tell that Lorgar's like, what? like to himself, how does he know that? And he's absolutely mocking Lorgar.
Yes.
At the same time, he's trying to be serious. He said, look, you are an idiot to think that the dark powers are going to withdraw their favor from Horus. They just aren't. They're too invested. Mm-hmm. And you're an idiot for thinking you can kill the War Master and tame the powers. This is the whole thing of, the truth versus my truth for Lorgar.
Yes.
And Fulgrim's tone, even during this apocryphal conversation about all these things that are going on, it's just, the word I use is delicious. It's just amazing. The voicing and the words, you just want to hug Fulgrim because he's just so fun to listen to because he just doesn't care. No. And that's the thing that's driving Lorgar nuts. He's like, look, I understand all this stuff you want to do. I know what you're planning. I know about the powers, blah, blah, blah. I just don't want to be involved. I just go away. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I'm having a great time. We're in hell. I'm having a blast.
But Lorgar is like, no, it's not good enough. So he tries to engage Fulgrim in combat. Mm-hmm. Then everything around them just becomes this big battle. And while this is happening, Lyax starts reciting little parts and pieces of the demon Fulgrim's true name.
Yes.
There was a point in the book where they talked about his body was covered with like 500 languages or something. Mm-hmm. And he knows all 500 of these languages. So slowly but surely, as Lorgar and Fulgrim are trying to beat the hell out of each other, you hear this true name coming out, and that big creature that we met first, that big bloated creature, all of a sudden, it's now like, it's not big and bloated anymore. Mm-hmm. It's lithe, it's muscular. It knows that its master is threatened. It's pushing in. Fulgrim kind of is feeling this true name thing now. Yep. And it's starting to wear on him. He's kind of confused about what's going on. And then Lyax screams the last of the true name, and boom, Fulgrim's just done because now he's under Lorgar's control.
Yes.
Which is like, oh my God, man. It is.
He leashed a Primarch demon.
Oh my gosh. And it's really Lyax who did it, because Lyax's the one who's giving the commands.
Yes.
Which is interesting because, once again, and we'll talk about this a little later, mm-hmm. Lorgar couldn't do the hard part himself. He has to have somebody else do it for him.
Well, my understanding was that Fulgrim would know if Lorgar came in with all the words in his head and was going to do it, but because Lyax had the helmet,
right? Well, that's true too. Yeah,
he couldn't be read as easily, and so he was kind of like a sleeper cell. He didn't actually knew that he knew the words until he was given the command.
Okay, all right.
But to that point though, of like it was a really fantastic scene because it's not just a matter of Lyax's ability to seize control over Fulgrim. Mm-hmm. The whole discussion that they have is like the scope of the war. Lorgar is like, this is the penultimate battle, dude. We got to go. We're getting the band back together. And Fulgrim's like, it's not though. Like now that he's a demon and he sees the full scope of time, he's like, this is really nothing, guys. And Lorgar's not getting the perspective. And it's interesting because he does, as they're approaching Fulgrim, have a moment with Lyax where he's saying, it's Fulgrim is a blessed brother because he was taken in completely by one of the Chaos Gods. He's a chosen, elevated one, but it also means now that he's a tool. And maybe that's what it means to have a demon name, is now you can be wielded. You're a thing.
He's a slave. He's another check. There's another one of the characters here who's a slave to darkness. Yeah.
Yep. And so again, we ask that question of who's the slave in this scenario? Well, obviously Fulgrim is. But also Lorgar, he thinks he's not a slave to anyone, but he's on a path of his own making that is just self-destruction. I mean,
sure,
he's a slave to himself. I don't know. That makes sense, but
he doesn't see it. To your
no, he can't. That's my point. Sorry,
he's completely unaware.
He lacks the perspective that Fulgrim has in this moment.
So he does take control of him. Lorgar says, give him the power to act, not to disobey. Fair. I mean, that's good. And And then, of course, the courtier gives loyalty, so they got that big creature on their side as well. And then Fulgrim, because he's compelled to, he gives this like all call to all the Emperor's children in the galaxy to meet at Olenor.
Yes.
So you get little scenes of, different. Oh, sorry, man. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It was just a bunch of like Emperor's children all over the galaxy who just started to hear a cool song, and they were like, "I want to go check out what that is."
Well, it's like all of a sudden they started listing people like, "Oh, there's Lucius, and there's Eglon," and you're going, "Oh, cool, I know those guys."
It reminded me of what is it? If you play AOS, the Spirit Song of the Sylvaneth, where like Alariel just does a call and everyone setting wide as can hear it, and so you're just like,
yes,
let's go there.
True. It's true. So there we are. Fulgrim has been leashed by Lyak and Lorgar.
I will say, in terms of the book's pacing, that was the first time that I felt like we really got a good chance to breathe once the action started. Because one of our 3 stories is functionally complete. I mean, there's still some more stuff with them, but it was a really cool one. What did you think of snagging Fulgrim? The whole scene.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah. It was real cool.
I just love Fulgrim's tone. I loved, even after he was leashed, he still understood, and he was still able to express, even though Lorgar wasn't listening, what was happening. He's very self-aware.
Yes.
And I just thought that was so cool even afterwards. So now we slide back to Perturabo and his entourage. They arrived on a planet called Deluge. They were told to go there, and this is where our man Angron's going to be. And of course, as you would expect, the landscape is just covered with war and blood and bones, and of course skulls. There's a lone figure moving towards them as they arrive, and it's Karn. It's like, oh, Karn, yes, it's Karn. But he doesn't attack. He warns them. He says, hey, you guys need to leave because they're coming.
Yep.
And I can't stop them. And you can just see Perturabo and those guys going, what? Now, the thing that I don't know that he does as great a job, I want to say this in the book, is when he's, Perturabo and his entourage land, but they don't really talk about how when Perturabo lands on a planet, that implies a lot. It implies that literally he is also installed like hundreds of meters of walls and gun emplacements and defenses. Those are all part of him landing on a planet. So all those things are ready. There are thousands of Iron Warriors with their shields and their guns and everything ready for this thing. So at first you're going, oh, this must be really bad. Well, truth, it is, but they're ready for it. Perturabo's ready. As you said earlier, he's always planning. He always knows what's going to happen, and he's always ready for it. So these waves of humans and demons and world eaters, charging the Iron Warriors, and they go through these things called configurations. Perturabo's first configuration, and they line up and they wipe out the first wave, and then his second configuration, third configuration. You're going, uh-oh.
It's not good when he's not fazed by the god of bloodshed coming over. I mean, obviously he's not the god, but like, Angron's not a good sight.
And then, as he says, like, fourth configuration, wham, Angron, just arrives on the scene, and you're going, oh boy, this is going to be fun. Angron and Perturabo, I don't know. We'll find out in a minute, but it was very cool. It was excellent. And the whole scene of how they were fighting off these waves was really cool too. How they were almost isolating the world eaters, the berserkers.
Yes.
So that they lost their their ferocity, lost their effectiveness because they weren't able to go berserk. It was really cool. Yes. So, and then we find this really cool scene in the quarters of the Vengeful Spirit, because we're back down there now. So Ekadon and his squad, Argonis and Malagurus, are trying to reach the command deck. They want to get up there. And suddenly a bunch of Blood Angels appear. And
Yeah.
Wow. What? Blood Angels? Yeah, Blood Angels. Remember that?
It was very random.
Yeah, exactly.
And my understanding is like you can kind of whoosh it away by saying like, oh yeah, this is the loyalists throwing all their little things as they see this big punch, start to converge. But it came off as very random in the book, and I was like, nah. But please don't.
Well, no, because the Blood Angels being who they are, Ekadon loses a hand, they still advance, but then all of a sudden a Blood Angels dreadnought shows up, and you're going, oh man, a dread. Sorry, they're not going to be able to do anything about this, except for the fact that they had a demon. So Tormageddon shows up. Obviously, he made a deal with Malagurst. He shows up and he just tears this dread apart, man. It was so much fun. And there's also a group called the Luperci, and these are basically the Sons of Horus version of the Valgorbak, is what they are.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like have wolf head or visage. They have like monstrous talons and
Luna wolves.
Mutated,
in demon possessed form.
Yep.
So they're fighting. Tormageddon's fighting. It's just such a cool scene. Ekadon goes to Malagurst, who by this time has been shot to pieces, man. Everybody was shooting at him. And, he's starting to lose it. And then he kind of descends because he's so wounded into his own spirit journey back with Horus again.
Yep.
And, they're on the fields of Ulanor now again. And Horus, this theme just keeps repeating. Horus says he needs to fight. He needs to resist.
Yes.
Malagurst says, make a choice. Decide. That's all you have to do is decide. And with that, in the dream world, Mal takes the blade he has and he shoves it into Horus's wound. And you're going, oh, oof. Well, the desired effect was not probably what Malagurst thought, because literally it drained all the life from Malagurst.
Yes.
It was like a,
like a siphon almost.
Siphon, yeah, exactly. That's the exact word I was looking for. Yeah.
And, all right, it's interesting. So during that, I just want to add one little thing. Through those different vision quest with the Acton Cruz's demon form or whatever, Malagurst is also being taught the overall meta lessons of the book. Like, it's through his discussions that we get this idea of the slaves to darkness and choice and will and all those meta conversations I feel like happen with him in some capacity.
Yes.
And so those, to give a little insight into why he stabbed Horus, it's like he's trying to push the Primarch to make a decision because that's what Malagurst has been told is the right decision. It could be the gods are just twisting Malagurst to then twist Horus to capitulate and yield, but we don't know. Again, the whole point is that we don't know who's a slave.
Right.
I thought it was really interesting how they did that. So anyway, to put context to him stabbing Horus in the dream is like, they're trying to break Malagurst too, of like, we need to break you of your Horus-centric vibe.
Yes. Although, don't you think, I think it's fascinating as a character in the Heresy.
Yeah.
Malagurst is actually one of the most loyal characters in the entire Horus Heresy series.
Yes.
He really is. He's incredibly loyal. And it's just really cool to see that even a, quote, bad guy can have that kind of, passionate loyalty towards somebody he considers a brother and somebody he serves. It's really cool. It's really neat to see that. So now it comes down to it. And Perturabo and Angron, because we're back on Deluge, they're face to face.
Yep.
So Argonis had asked Perturabo, how are you going to conquer this guy? He says he'll start with his weakness. And you're like, what? What kind of weakness does he have? Well, he starts by just having everybody shoot into Angron.
Exactly. How many of those 4-up ward saves can you make, Angron player?
And then after that huge, just push of, how many wards? Perturabo just goes at Angron. He says, hey, You're weak. You're a slave. You're born a slave you still are. And I thought that was a great line. That was awesome. Your strength flees. It is yours. It's not yours. It belongs to your masters. Another great line. Your strength flees. It is not yours. It belongs to your masters. Perturabo recognizes the slave of darkness that Angron is. And all the while he's kind of beating Angron with trash talk while physically they are beating the crap out of each other. Now you're thinking, of course, Angron is just going to beat the crap out of Perturabo. But in this story, in this scene, you don't realize how strong Perturabo is. And this is the iron within, iron without thing. Mm-hmm. He has such inner strength that even though Angron is tearing his armor apart and putting these huge wounds on him and everything else, he is giving as big as he is taking.
Yep.
And this, I think, is part of that stoicism, that inner strength that Perturabo possesses that overcomes Angron's rage. Because whether Angron, there's still something in there. There's still an intelligent being inside of Angron when he's not enraged, which isn't very often. But I think, at least as I'm reading this or listening to it, I think he's actually recognizing this strength in Perturabo.
Absolutely.
And he's like, oh man, this is amazing what this guy's doing. Now, while this is going on, Volk appears. And as we talked about before, I'm describing him as the first obliterator. His body forms weapons. Oh, I need a heavy bolter. I need a las cannon. I need a plasma. And it's just like the weapons are just changing, right? Yeah. They sublime in one place, they reform in another, and you're going, yes, obliterator. I'm calling it. And finally, after this, Angron falls, and he's all withered and battered. His wings are all torn. And he is just like, you kind of think of an adult in a fetal position almost,
Yeah, the way it was described, it's almost like he's coming down from a high and just kind of crumbles a little bit. Mm-hmm. That may be part of just calming him down enough to think, which is kind of what I was leaning towards of just. Yes. Did you ever play the game series BioShock, by the way, Dan?
Oh, yeah, I played the game.
Okay,
yeah.
It just, the whole conversation reminds me of a conversation that you have with one of the antagonists in that game, but the line is, a man chooses, a slave obeys. And that was just like he's asking Angron to stop and choose to throw his rage at the Emperor. And he's like, you are already a slave, but I'm offering you a chance to choose. Right? And essentially that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And that's how Angron essentially takes the tether to fall down and come down a little bit to be able to point in a direction.
You pointed out something very important there, I think, with giving him a choice.
Yes. Because
when you think about it, no one has ever given Angron a choice.
No.
That is really, I'd love for somebody else to point it to me, where it is in the stories, but nobody has ever done that. And so you wonder.
No, that was part of his story in his book, was just decisions were always robbed from him. Life is happening to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the Korn takes his decisions away from him. So you wonder if that really got to him, got to the inner place where he is and say, oh, geez, the only person who ever let me choose. All right. So while this is happening, the Ultramarines Crusade fleet is here. Oh, geez, more freaking Imperials.
Yep.
But so in the throne room, with the War Master, we're back there now. Ekanon sees the Justarian, the bodyguards, the Terminator bodyguards, under the command of Kyber. They're attacking the Looper Kai, and the battle is just brutal. You have these Gal Vorbak who are fighting Terminators, and it's a really beautiful picture, actually. Mm-hmm. So two Justarians, they attack Ekanon, and after a little bit of time, Axeman and Kyber, who are both the guys who are kind of fomenting this
division
rebellion, right?
Yep.
They knock him down. They're about to make their killing blows, and suddenly Tormageddon. Tormageddon! I love him in this book. It's just great. He just slams into both of them, And Kyber raises his weapon, and all of a sudden, we hear the voice. We heard the word no, and it's the voice of the War Master.
Mm-hmm.
Horus has made his choice. He tells his sons that all doubt and fear has to die.
Yep.
Everything must burn. You know, must fear, it must kneel. He looks at the viewport and leaves the room to finish the battle. And he's got to meet with his brothers on Ullanor. He knows that. And it's just, all of a sudden, you see a totally different Horus than you've really seen before. He is fully and completely now accepted who he is.
Yes, I would say this is the point where you put down your Horus model and take up your Horus Ascended model.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? Because you can do both in your list building in the game or whatever. So like, I think this is that point where
I think you're
one
right.
kind of fades into the other.
You're absolutely right. And so that, as he walks off to finish the battle, we shift back to Perturabo, and to your point earlier, he gave Angron a choice. And they both return to their flagships because Angron has decided to go with Perturabo. But in order to escape Ullanor, they have to engage their warp engines inside of a gravity field to get through the Ultramarines fleet. And you're going, oh, this is a bad idea.
It's a terrible idea. I love
We've been told for 40 books that this is a bad idea.
Yep. Yeah, this is the don't cross the streams moment in Ghostbusters, yeah.
But, Perturabo understands that Angron he has to feed. He needs blood. So as they're, and this is one of your favorite things you talk, I want you to talk about this scene, but they basically break through by engaging their warp engines in the middle of the Ultramarines fleet and the chaos that ensues. But what is the coolest part of this?
Yes. So they're like, we got to feed Angron. How are we going to feed Angron? The scene is them warping out of the system at breakneck speed with Angron clinging to the outside of the ship in full demon mode, screaming as they are taking stuff. There's souls all around them that are getting ripped into the warp as they're escaping. And it's like he's surfing on the ship, and there's the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin playing, and it's just pure metal. Oh, it's the coolest thing in the world.
Listeners, anybody who has seen the new Doom movies, if you can picture Paul riding the worm, that is a good visual of Angron riding on the ship.
Yes, it was epic. I was like, oh man.
Oh, it was so cool. Yeah, I had to read it a few times going, what?
Yes.
Did he just write that?
Because they're going through the warp, and so Angron's on the outside just kind of drinking it in as a demon, which makes perfect sense, but
it's not going to hurt him.
No, you just think about it that's awesome. What an awesome scene. Good job, John.
That was amazing. So now we're on Ullanor, and Lorgar and Fulgrim are there.
Yep.
And they're chatting about killing Horus, of course. And both of their legions know what the plan is. They know that they're going to do this. And this was kind of interesting. It's kind of a quick thing, but it also made me think about another character who we'll talk about again, who was in the story. Suddenly, all of a sudden, on the top of a hill, there's a figure in armor. And it's blue armor, but it's that kind of greenish blue armor. And you're thinking, yeah. And then he says, hey, I'm Alfarius. And of course, they all say that. But at the same time, he says, I am Alfarius. The Sons of Horus fleet arrives in the system. And then Lorgar says, hey, make preparations. They're going to kill Horus as he arrives here. And one of the things that they did, and Lyak ordered Fulgrim to do, was to start using their sonic weapons and start disrupting communications with their sonic powers that they have from Slaanesh. So they use all that. Nobody can talk to anybody else, which is interesting. Except, and we're gonna talk about this in a minute. There is an exception to that. So Thunderhawk arrives on the surface. Black armored warriors disembark, and they are Axeman, Kyber, and Tormageddon. All walk out, and then Perturabo and Angron arrive, And due to Perturabo's, he has that tactical acumen. He's remained undetected. He came in like behind a star, behind the planet. And so Lorgar doesn't know that Perturabo is there until they're almost like right on the planet.
Yes.
And so the Iron Lord and all his ships are ready. They have their weapons ready to go.
Because they don't understand Lorgar's plan yet. So they are coming into this like, it looks like a trap is being set.
Yeah.
Weird.
And didn't Perturabo, he made a reference to on Istvan 5 or Istvan 3, where the last time he saw Third Legion ships, which is the Emperor's Children, it was a rebellion.
Yep.
And he's like, ooh.
Don't like this.
Yeah, so there is one message that does get through, though, to Perturabo, and it says that Horus is dead.
Yes.
You're going, oh, what a scumbag, man.
Mm-hmm.
Scumbag on the Vengeful Spirit. Comms jamming is in effect. Ekadon wants to know why they can't communicate with the War Master. And Satanul says that based on all her experience, she knows that the jamming is coming from the Third Legion.
Yes.
So that's the give, right?
This is clearly a warp thing. It's got Lorgar scent all over it.
Yeah, it
Nobody's
does.
Happy.
So on the planet, Horus and his retinue, they approach Lorgar and Fulgrim and all the people, and everybody, shows abeyance to Horus. Even Lorgar, in his little minimalist way, he kind of tips his head, to show he's respectful. And as he's doing so, all these plans of treachery. It's just so cool. Everything's ready to go. And remember, he was the one who said the gods have to have their victory. Horus will not give it to them. He's thinking this. So Horus goes over and reaches out to Lorgar, even to bless him or put his hand on his shoulder or something. This is what Lorgar's thinking. And all of a sudden, Horus just smacks him right in the chest and throws him about 50 feet.
The scene was so well written because it walks up and Lorgar's like, he doesn't know we're going to betray him, right? He's walking up like his arms outstretched, like he's going to give him a hug, and then boom, cold cocks him across the room.
He just slaps him like a rag doll, man. It was great. So he gives Horus Lorgar a chance. He says, "Hey, you know what? You can end me if you want. It's okay. You can try.
If you're man
enough."
And
of course, Lorgar, being the coward that he has always been, he doesn't take the opportunity. And Horus basically banishes him, says, "I never want to see you again. Get out of here.
Yep.
You're banished from my presence forever." And was kind of interesting because during this time, the hold over Fulgrim breaks. And Fulgrim restored now, he's back to his normal self, if that can be called normal. He rushes right over to Lorgar and just like stands over him. And Lorgar just knows that like with a flip of his wrist, Fulgrim can kill him. And this is a great quote. I love this quote. Fulgrim looks at Lorgar and says, "You should never let somebody else bear a burden you're afraid of. It has a habit of creating resentment." Now we think about this.
Yes.
So Lyak had to bear the burden of controlling Fulgrim, right? But let's think about an even more important time that Lorgar had somebody else do his work for him. When he sent the Gal Vorbak in to find the truth instead of him doing it himself.
Yeah.
He sacrificed hundreds of his own sons to find the truth instead of going himself. And what happened to them and the horror that they had to endure, it's like, yeah, he always says somebody to do his dirty work because that's who he is.
Yep.
And it was just so revealing. But I flash back to that right away.
No, absolutely. I thought it was a fantastic line. What's happening in this scene is like Horus is beating up Lorgar. Lorgar looks at Lyak and says, "Hey, are you going to spring the demon?" And Lyak just shakes his head no. And so like this this idea of what the Chaos Army is like, oh no, as long as Horus is alive, we will bind ourselves to him. Like he's clearly the chosen. Lorgar is the odd man out in this situation, and Lyak essentially lets go of Fulgrim's leash as a result. He's like, I pledge my allegiance to Horus. Slaanesh or Fulgrim doesn't seem like he's going to come kill Lyak immediately or anything like that. It's just he just lets it go. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yep. So now we're back. Now that has kind of happened. So we're on Perturabo's flagship, and he and Argonis realize that the only place where there are open comm links are between any ships in the Trision. So the only place that anything's open to is Lorgar's flagship. So the demon that possessed Volk had warned Perturabo earlier about Lorgar. And all of a sudden, it's just perfectly clear what's going on to Perturabo. So he orders all of fire control solutions locked onto the ships of the 3rd and the 17th Legion.
Yep.
Tells the World Eaters that Horus has been betrayed and to loose the dogs to their work, which I thought was so great.
Yes.
Let these guys go and just skulls for the skull throne. And then, of course, a mystery fleet arrives. And who are the mystery fleet?
The mystery fleet is a whole... I didn't know when they were describing the armor initially. Yeah. It is the Thousand Suns, led by Magnus himself.
It's Magnus.
They basically tear a butthole in the universe and just tear out of there like at full bore. And oh yeah. And he wasn't even summoned. He was just like, hey, I heard there's a party. We're going to go punch the Emperor. I'm in.
Yeah.
He just shows up on his own because Magnus knows.
It was so great. What a great reintroduction.
Yes.
After, the fall of Prospero.
It was great to see him like in some form of supremacy and anger after, because he was broken at the end of
literally
when Russ sent him away. So like having him come back into the scene like ready for vengeance was cool.
Yes. He walks over, he shows abeyance to Horus, pledges his loyalty because the Emperor destroyed my home planet. It's like, I'm in.
Yep.
And his legion is there, what's left of it, not much. But that was a very, very cool little drop in, I thought.
Oh, yes. And then they didn't mention it in this book, but we know as readers that right now Mortarion is having a very bad day flying towards Terra. Because they're in the middle of the transition from becoming the Legion to the Death Guard that we know in 40K.
Yes.
That event's happening as all of these forces are also binding together. So it's like, snap.
Buried Dagger, that was the story.
Yep.
That you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. So it's all working out. And so the story kind of ends. I wanted to go through a few little kind of bullet point things.
Yeah, there's a few post-credit scenes, if you will.
I think. So Perturabo's been named the Grand High Marshal of the War Masters. Very cool. And there is a second Ulanor, essentially. You got hundreds of thousands of Space Marines and War Machines and Titans and everything else back on Ulanor. You can't even imagine, how this is. All those traitor Primarchs looking out over their soldiers. The only ones who... the only legion that didn't show up was Alfarius. It was the I'm gonna have to take a head break here. Alfarius,
Alpha Legion.
Who Alpha Legion? Yeah, it's the Alpha Legion, and Alfarius showed up by himself. He didn't bring his legion. And
good.
This was so perfect when Horus asked him, like, "What did you bring to me? What did you bring to your War Master? You?" He hands him this little data cylinder, and you're going, oh, God, I just know what's on this thing. So it basically contained every single detail of every defense for the entire solar system.
Yep.
And then he left. He was like, hey, I did what you asked me to do. I'm out of here. Which is interesting. I mean, he didn't give the finger to Horus, because he did what he told him to do.
Yes.
But, Alfarius is the one Primarch here. He isn't chaotic. He isn't engaged with the Pantheon. But he's engaged. We know having done Legion, we understand his motivation for siding with Horus.
Yes.
But I just thought it was a great way to keep them out of it. But
and then we see there's a whole book about Perturabo's supernatural ability to fight wars and take into consideration of plans. Like, that was a whole sub theme. And then at the very end of the book, Alfarius hands Horus all the defense information for Terra. So he's just had a whole book of Perturabo showing how smart he is, how capable he is, how deadly he is with even the smallest bit of information, and then you hand him everything. I'm like, oh, that guy's gonna have a great day.
Yeah, we know from the Siege books that Alfarius has had agents, which we'll talk about in a second. Everywhere. He's got agents everywhere, including on Terra. So that's kind of that scene. He left. Argonis becomes Horus's new equerry, because Malagars has died.
Yep.
Horus knew that Lorgar was going to betray him, and the question is how. So Lyak realizes that Actia, that woman who showed up at the Webway, is actually the person that revealed Lorgar's plan to the War Master. Yes. And the question I have is, who is Actia? And I'm going to put my guess in. I think she's Alpha Legion.
Ooh.
Because he has a lot of humans who are operatives working, including psychers and other people. And you kind of wonder, there's that, like, Alfarius knew that something needed to go on. He knew that Lorgar was up to something. So he needed somebody to be there to find out what was going on. So my take is that Actia is part of Alfarius's network.
Interesting. So my take was that she was, much like Lydek, one of the word bearers, kind of like cultist, devotees, acolytes, who followed Lorgar's logic up to a point and then realized with their perspective, he's not the chosen one. He can't decide those things. And so decided to kind of circumvent his power. Because of like how intrinsically religious the character is, like with all of her know-how of all their worlds. And I was like, she was really cool. I don't know. There's some cool intrigue there.
And then the next thing, kind of a sad thing, but it was Ekadon and Argonis join each other on the training deck. Remember, Argonis now is the new equerry. And the question is, he talks to him, and you kind of have the implication that, Ekadon did what he did in violation of orders from Abaddon and Kyber.
Yes.
Not to help Malagars. And so Argonis is basically saying, hey, even if you saved the War Master's life, you were in violation of orders.
Yep.
And eventually, because we can talk about it, eventually he is killed. Ekadon is killed because of his, quote, being a traitor, which is just so stupid, man, because he did the right thing. And anyway, that stuff happens. So the story ends with an earlier conversation between Horus and Malagars on the eve of the first Ulanor. And he says, Horus asks him, what do I have to do? And Malagars says, you just have to accept it.
Yep.
And that's all it was this time. You just have to accept it. And once he accepted it, he became what he is.
Yes. Yes. And so that is Slaves to Darkness by John French. Oh, okay. I'll give your voice a second. I'm going to do my thoughts. Because thank you so much, Dan, for all your hard work. This was a lot of work to put notes together for, because there's 3 different stories in one. I enjoyed this one for a few reasons. We get to see, really, I think the core theme is, it's the book to me that transitions from Horus Heresy Chaos Armies to 40k Chaos Armies, where the dissolution of order, of respect, of the chain of command what is a space marine. Like, there's so many different kinds of fighters in this book because they're all changing and they're warping and they're twisting and it's falling apart. So I think it's a very important book for that reason. It also sets up this giant climactic fist that is headed towards Terra that is hyper prepared and ready to mess things up. And I thought it was a wild ride. It was just the nature of individuality, of what it means to bear the burden of leadership, of, I don't know, all those things. Your identity when you're a leader, that kind of stuff. Yes. I thought it had some fantastic sub-themes. I don't think each of the stories was big enough to flesh out into a full book. Like, I wouldn't necessarily want a full book of Perturabo hunting Angron, but the way it was brought together was just so succinct and really fun.
Yes.
I thought it was a fantastic read.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great book. Certainly if you're a Traitor Legion fan, this is a wonderful book because you're going to get insight that you haven't had before, because this is not, like I said, 99% from the Traitor side.
Absolutely.
But it also gives you exceptional insight into some of these Primarchs and who they really are. Like, you find out more about who Perturabo really is, more about the true nature of Lorgar. You find the true nature of Fulgrim,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just a wonderful read for a lot of reasons. And yeah.
Okay. Any other last thoughts here? I have a little something I'm going to spring on here just for funskis, but
Sure.
Okay. So we recently had a comment in one of our YouTube videos that I wanted to share with you. This is, you don't have to worry about it today. This is about our next episode, but we might be doing a little one-off just for funskis because someone asked us what AOS army each Primarch would play, and I want us to be thinking about that for next episode. I was like, that's incredible. Who was it?
That's not a bad idea.
Is it Kale Beckert on YouTube asked that in one of my videos, and I was like, oh, I love that idea for a question.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look forward to that next time. You and I can just hang out and chat about that. We can do a separate one if you want. But
sure.
What are we thinking for our next book? What sounds good to us? Okay, and so our next book, we're going to be doing Titan Death by Guy Haley, which I'm just looking at the cover here. A beta Garmin. The Titan legions clash in a brutal conflict will decide the course of the war. So we're taking a quick break from Space Marines to talk about Titan companies and legions and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for that.
Yes.
And if you guys have a book that you would like us to read, please leave in the comments here on YouTube or over on whatever you're listening to this, whatever app. And we'll give us some direction. Any last words or thoughts there, Dan?
No, I think we're good, buddy.
Okay, thank you all so much for listening. And until next time, may the Emperor protect.